I never thought I'd become the grandmother who wasn't allowed to see her grandchildren. That was something that happened to other people. Difficult people. Unreasonable people. Not to me, Margaret Wilson, retired elementary school teacher with a spotless reputation and more patience than most saints. But here I was, sitting alone in my garden on a perfect Sunday afternoon, staring at photos of my grandchildren on my phone instead of watching them run through the sprinkler as we'd planned. The message from my son Thomas had arrived at 7:43 that morning. "Mom, we can't make it today. Something came up. Sorry." No explanation. No rescheduling. The 5th cancellation in 2 months. I knew what was happening, of course. My daughter-in-law Vanessa was systematically cutting me out of their lives. The realization had been dawning slowly, painfully, like watching a beautiful flower close its petals one by one. It started after Christmas dinner last year. I'd made an innocent comment about how my grandson Dylan seemed to prefer the educational toys I'd bought rather than the expensive electronic gadgets Vanessa's parents had given him. I wasn't trying to compete. I genuinely believed in the value of creative play. But Vanessa's face had tightened into that forced smile I'd come to recognize as trouble. "We all parent differently, don't we, Margaret?" she'd said, her voice coated in artificial sweetness. "Some of us just follow the latest research." I should have let it go. After 30 years of teaching first graders, I knew a thing or two about child development, but I smiled and nodded. "You're absolutely right, dear." But something had shifted that day. Visits became less frequent. Phone calls were rushed. When I did see the children, Vanessa hovered nearby, monitoring our interactions like a prison guard. I set my phone down and walked to the edge of my garden, admiring the roses I'd pruned to perfection. Thomas and the grandkids had helped me plant them 3 years ago. Dylan, just 4 then, had named each bush after a dinosaur. The bright red climber near the fence was T-Rex. I touched its velvety petals, remembering Dylan's small hands patting the soil around its base. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Eleanor. "Did the kids come today?" "Still on for bridge tomorrow?" I typed back. "Canceled again. Yes to bridge." Eleanor was one of the few people who knew how much this situation hurt me. "Something needs to be done," she'd declared last week over coffee. "You can't just let her push you out of their lives." But what could I do? Force my way in? Create a scene? That would only make things worse. Thomas had always been a peacekeeper, caught between his mother and his wife. I refused to make him choose. The irony was that financially, I could give them everything. After Gerald passed 5 years ago, I'd discovered he was much better with investments than I'd realized. Between his life insurance, our savings, and some surprisingly valuable stock options from his company, I was sitting on a small fortune. Not that anyone in the family knew the details. Gerald and I had always lived modestly, and I saw no reason to change that. Looking at my sensible 3-bedroom ranch house and my 10-year-old sedan, nobody would guess I was worth over $2 million. Even Thomas didn't know the full extent of it. Gerald had always insisted we keep our financial matters private. "Money changes how people see you," he'd warned. How right he was. I returned to my chair and picked up the gardening catalog I'd been browsing before getting lost in my thoughts. Maybe I'd order those Japanese maple saplings I'd been considering. The yard could use a splash of color, and gardening gave me purpose on empty Sundays like this one. My phone rang, startling me. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. I answered, immediately my heart quickening. "Mom?" His voice sounded strained. "Are you busy right now?" "Not at all," I said, trying to keep the eagerness from my voice. "Is everything all right?" "Well, not exactly." He paused, and I could hear Vanessa saying something in the background. "Look, I know this is last minute, but we have a situation. Vanessa's parents were supposed to help with a down payment on a house we're looking at, but there's been some kind of financial setback on their end. Ah, so that's what this was about. It's a perfect house, Mom. 4 bedrooms, good school district, big yard for the kids. But we need to act fast or we'll lose it. Another pause, more muffled conversation. I wouldn't ask, but we're really in a tight spot. Could you maybe help out a little? Just a loan until we get on our feet? I closed my eyes, feeling a complex wave of emotions. Hurt that this was the reason he was calling after weeks of distance. Relief at the chance to be needed again. Wariness about the strings that might be attached. How much are we talking about, Thomas? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Well? He cleared his throat. The down payment is $80,000. Vanessa's parents were going to cover half. We've saved $20,000 ourselves, so we're $40,000 short. $40,000. A significant sum, but not even a dent in what I had set aside. Still, this wasn't really about money, was it? I see, I said slowly. Why don't you both come over this evening? We can discuss it in person. More muffled conversation, then Thomas's voice brightened. That would be great, Mom. Around 7? The kids will be in bed by then, so it'll just be us. Of course. Heaven forbid I should see my grandchildren during this financial transaction. 7 works fine, I replied. I'll make some coffee. After we hung up, I sat very still, watching a hummingbird dart among my fuchsias. It hovered, its wings a blur of motion, then zipped away as quickly as it had arrived, like the visits from my grandchildren. I sighed and stood up, smoothing my gardening pants. I had a few hours to decide exactly how to handle this conversation. One thing was certain. If money was going to bring me back into my grandchildren's lives, I needed to be very clever about how I used it. After all, I hadn't raised a wonderful son and taught generations of children without learning something about negotiation. I smiled to myself as I headed inside to prepare. Tonight was going to be interesting indeed. I spent the afternoon preparing for Thomas and Vanessa's visit with a curious mix of anxiety and resolve. By 6:30, I had changed into a simple but elegant navy dress. Nothing flashy, but a step up from my usual casual attire. I wanted to project quiet dignity, not desperation. The coffee table held a tray with my grandmother's porcelain cups and a plate of lemon cookies I knew Thomas loved. Beside them, I'd placed a single folder containing bank statements and investment reports I'd never shown anyone before. Power, I reminded myself, isn't about flaunting what you have. It's about knowing when to reveal it. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and opened the door. Mom, Thomas said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. At 36, my son was beginning to show his age. Vanessa stood, slightly behind him, designer purse clutched in manicured hands. "Hello, Margaret," she said with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Come in, please." I stepped aside, noting the way Vanessa's gaze swept across my modest living room, probably calculating its worth. Little did she know that the unremarkable watercolor hanging beside the bookshelf was an original from a now-famous artist. A gift from Gerald's boss decades ago, now worth more than my car. We exchanged pleasantries as I poured coffee. How was work? Thomas's law firm was busy as ever. How were the children? Growing like weeds. Dylan had started t-ball. Little Emma was stringing full sentences together. I absorbed these crumbs of information like a woman dying of thirst. "We brought some pictures," Thomas said, pulling out his phone. "From Emma's birthday last month." I froze with the coffee pot in midair. Emma's birthday? But that was 2 weeks ago. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Thomas glanced at Vanessa, who suddenly became very interested in stirring her coffee. "We had a small family thing," Thomas finally said, not meeting my eyes. "It was last minute." Family. The word stung. I was family too, wasn't I? I set down the coffee pot. Carefully. I see. Well, I'd love to see the pictures. As Thomas showed me photos of a celebration I should have been invited to, I maintained my composure. Emma's curly hair had grown longer. She wore the pink dress I'd sent. At least they'd allowed that connection. She looks beautiful, I said, softly. I wish I could have been there. Mom, about the house, Thomas redirected, clearly uncomfortable. We've put in an offer, but it's contingent on securing the full down payment in the next 10 days. I nodded, allowing the change of subject. Tell me about this house. For the next 15 minutes, they described a charming Tudor-style home, with a wraparound porch and a maple tree perfect for a tire swing. The children would each have their own rooms. There was a finished basement Thomas could use as a home office. The school district was excellent. It sounds wonderful, I said sincerely. I'm happy you found something you love. So, Vanessa said, setting her cup down with a clink. Thomas mentioned our situation. We're hoping you might be able to help with a loan. The directness was refreshing, at least. I appreciated that she didn't beat around the bush. I've been giving it some thought, I replied, and I believe I can help. The relief on their faces was immediate. Thomas exhaled audibly, and Vanessa's shoulders relaxed for the first time since they'd arrived. That's fantastic, Mom. We can work out a repayment plan. I held up my hand gently. Before we discuss details, I'd like to talk about something else first. Their expressions shifted from relief to wariness. I miss my grandchildren, I said simply, my voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. In the past 6 months, planned visits have been canceled repeatedly. I wasn't invited to Emma's birthday. I haven't been allowed to babysit or have the children for overnights as I used to. Mom, we've just been busy, Thomas began. Please, I interrupted. Let me finish. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm simply stating facts. I turned to Vanessa. I believe something changed after Christmas. If I offended you somehow, I'd like to know what I did wrong so I can make it right. Vanessa's posture stiffened. I don't know what you're talking about. We've just had a lot going on. I held her gaze. Vanessa, I taught first grade for 30 years. I can tell when someone isn't being forthright with me. Thomas shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Mom, is this really necessary? We came to discuss financial matters. Yes, I said firmly. It is necessary. Because what I'm prepared to offer goes far beyond $40,000. But I need honesty first. That caught their attention. Vanessa exchanged a look with Thomas, some silent communication passing between them. Fine, Vanessa finally said. If you want honesty, I'll give you honesty. I don't appreciate your constant undermining of our parenting decisions. The educational toys comment at Christmas was just one example. You always have some subtle criticism about how we're raising the children. I blinked, genuinely surprised. I've never meant to criticize. You don't have to say it outright, she continued. It's the size, the raised eyebrows when Dylan has screen time, the comments about how in your day children played outside until dark. It makes me feel judged, and I won't have my children seeing that tension. I sat back, absorbing her words. Had I really been so transparent? I thought. I'd been careful to keep my concerns to myself. I see, I said quietly. I'm sorry, Vanessa. Truly. I never meant to make you feel that way. She looked slightly taken aback by my apology, as if she'd expected defensiveness. There's something else you should know, I continued, reaching for the folder beside me. Something Gerald and I kept private for many years. I opened the folder and slid several documents across the coffee table. Thomas leaned forward, his brow furrowed as he scanned the figures. Mom, this can't be right, he said, looking up at me in disbelief. This says you have just over $2 million, I finished for him. Plus this house, which is fully paid for. Vanessa's eyes widened, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. Your father was an excellent investor, and his life insurance policy was substantial. I've lived simply because that's what makes me comfortable, not because I needed to. Why didn't you tell us? Thomas asked, still processing this revelation. Gerald believed that money changes relationships, I explained. And he was right. Look at how quickly you came to me when you needed financial help, after months of keeping me at arm's length. Vanessa had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, I continued. I'm saying it because I want honesty between us. So here's my honest proposal. I will give you, not loan, but give $50,000 toward your down payment. They exchanged glances again, clearly not expecting such generosity. That's incredibly generous, Thomas began. I'm not finished, I said. Additionally, I'm setting up a college fund for each of the children with $200,000 each, and I'll be revising my will to leave the majority of my estate to them, with provisions for both of you as well. The shock on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. However, I continued, my voice firm, this comes with expectations. I want to be part of my grandchildren's lives in a meaningful way. Regular visits, at least twice monthly. I want to be included in birthdays, school events, and holidays. And occasionally, I'd like the children to stay overnight with me, as they used to. I leaned forward, meeting Vanessa's gaze directly. I don't want to undermine your parenting. I'll be more mindful of my comments and reactions, but I need you to understand that those children are my family too, and cutting me out hurts not just me, but them as well. The room fell silent. Thomas looked at Vanessa, clearly leaving the decision to her. She stared at the financial statements, then at me, her expression unreadable. Well, she finally said, setting down her cup. It seems we have some arrangements to discuss. The week following my financial revelation was a study in human nature. Thomas called daily, his voice warm with a newfound attentiveness. Vanessa texted me pictures of the children, current ones, not the recycled photos from months ago she'd occasionally send to maintain appearances. It would be easy to feel cynical about this sudden change of heart, but I refused to let bitterness cloud what mattered most: the children. When Thomas asked if I'd like to come see the house they were buying that Saturday, I accepted immediately. The kids are excited to see you, he added, almost as an afterthought. Dylan keeps asking when Grandma's coming. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I've missed them terribly. I know, Mom. I'm sorry things got complicated. Complicated. Such a diplomatic word for what had happened. But I appreciated the olive branch, however imperfect. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather. I wore casual clothes, jeans and a light sweater, and brought a picnic basket filled with sandwiches and homemade cookies. No need for formality. This wasn't a business transaction, but a family outing. As I pulled into the driveway of the address Thomas had provided, I felt a flutter of anxiety. The house was indeed charming, a 2-story Tudor with a beautiful front garden and the promised wraparound porch. Much grander than my modest ranch, but not ostentatious. A good family home. Before I could even exit my car, the front door burst open, and Dylan came tearing down the walkway, his little legs pumping with all the enthusiasm of his 6 years. "Grandma!" he shouted, flinging himself against me as I stepped out. "You came! Dad said you were coming, but sometimes grown-ups say things and they don't happen." The innocent observation struck me like a physical blow. How many broken promises had this child already learned to expect? I hugged him tightly. "I'm here, sweetheart. I've missed you so much." Emma toddled down the path behind him, her chubby legs still unsteady. At not quite 3, she was more reserved, watching me with solemn eyes until I knelt to her level. "Hello, my darling," I said softly. "Do you remember your old grandma?" She nodded, then reached out to touch my silver pendant, a favorite fascination of hers. The familiar gesture melted something inside me. She remembered. Despite the months of separation, she remembered. Thomas appeared in the doorway, Vanessa beside him. Both smiled, though Vanessa's remained guarded. "Come in, Mom," Thomas called. "We'll give you the grand tour." The house was partially staged, with the current owner's furniture, but I could already see how well it would suit them. Large windows filled the rooms with natural light. The kitchen opened to a family room where the children could play within sight. The backyard was a child's paradise with mature trees and enough space for a swing set or a garden, perhaps both. "It's lovely," I said sincerely. "You've chosen well." "We close in 3 weeks," Thomas said, pride evident in his voice. The inspector found a few minor issues, but the owners agreed to fix everything. "And we've already started packing," Vanessa added. "It's going to be a busy month." I nodded, seeing the perfect opening. "I imagine you'll have your hands full. Perhaps the children could stay with me for a weekend while you pack? It would give you some uninterrupted time." A flicker of the old resistance crossed Vanessa's face, but Thomas jumped in before she could respond. "That's a great idea, Mom. Maybe next weekend? The kids would love it, and we could really use the time to organize." I noticed he'd answered for both of them. Interesting. The power dynamic had shifted slightly. Vanessa forced a smile. "Sure. That would be helpful." Victory, small but significant. I didn't press my advantage, turning instead to the children who were clearly bursting with things to show me. Dylan took my hand, pulling me toward the backyard to demonstrate how high he could climb the maple tree while Emma clutched her favorite stuffed bunny, following us like a small shadow. We spent the afternoon exploring the house and grounds, then enjoyed our picnic on the back porch. I'd deliberately packed Dylan's favorite peanut butter and banana sandwiches and the oatmeal cookies he'd always loved. Emma, I noticed, had developed a preference for cheese and apple slices, something I filed away for future visits. Throughout the afternoon, I was careful not to overstep. When Dylan asked if he could have a cookie before his sandwich, I glanced at Vanessa for permission instead of deciding myself. When Emma had a small tantrum over sharing a toy with her brother, I let Vanessa handle the discipline while offering quiet support. Small gestures, but I saw that Vanessa noticed them. As the afternoon waned, the children grew tired. Emma crawled into my lap for a story, her small head nestled against my shoulder. The familiar weight and sweet scent of her nearly brought me to tears. How many moments like this had I missed? "Would you like to put her down for her nap?" Vanessa asked unexpectedly. She usually sleeps for about an hour this time of day. The offer stunned me. This intimate caregiving task had always been jealously guarded. "I'd love to," I said, trying not to show how much the gesture meant to me. I carried Emma to the portable playpen set up in what would be her bedroom, singing the same lullaby I'd sung to Thomas decades ago. She drifted off quickly, her small fingers curled around my thumb until the last moment. When I returned to the porch, Vanessa was alone, Dylan having gone with Thomas to check something in the garage. "She went down easily," I reported, taking a seat across from her. Vanessa nodded, fidgeting with her wedding ring. "Margaret, I think we should talk." Here it comes, I thought. The negotiation, the terms and conditions. "I know I haven't been welcoming lately," she began, surprising me with her directness. "And I'm not going to pretend it's only because of your comments about our parenting." I remained silent, giving her space to continue. "The truth is, I've always felt like I was competing with you. Thomas admires you so much. The children adore you. You were this perfect mother who raised a successful son and had this picture-perfect marriage. And I'm just struggling every day to feel like I'm not failing at everything." Her vulnerability caught me off guard. This wasn't the calculating daughter-in-law I'd imagined. This was a young woman grappling with insecurities I knew all too well. "Oh, Vanessa," I said softly. "I was never perfect. Far from it. Thomas went through a rebellious phase that nearly gave me gray hair overnight. Gerald and I had our difficulties, just like any couple. We just didn't parade them in front of others." She looked up, surprised by my honesty. And motherhood? I continued. I questioned myself constantly. Still do, apparently. I smiled ruefully. I never meant to make you feel inadequate. If anything, I've been in awe of how you managed 2 children while maintaining your career. I didn't have that challenge. I took years off teaching when Thomas was young. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. Really? Because you always seem so confident in how things should be done. I laughed gently. That's just age, dear. You reach a point where you've seen enough to have opinions, but that doesn't mean they're always right for everyone. A small smile tugged at her lips. I suppose I haven't handled things well either. Using the children as leverage was wrong. I can see that now. The admission hung in the air between us, neither accusation nor full apology, but a beginning. The money complicates things, she added after a moment. I don't want you to think we're only including you because of your financial situation. But it is a factor, I said, not unkindly. And that's all right. Money is a reality in family dynamics whether we acknowledge it or not. I just want honesty between us. She nodded slowly. Okay, honestly? Yes. Knowing you can help with the children's education and our future security changes things. It would be hypocritical to pretend otherwise. She met my gaze directly. But seeing Dylan's face light up when he saw you today, that made me realize we've been unfair, regardless of money. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was real, more valuable than polite fictions. So where do we go from here? I asked. Vanessa took a deep breath. We start over. Regular visits like you suggested, the overnight stays next weekend, and I promise to be more inclusive going forward. And I promise to be more respectful of your parenting decisions, I countered, even when I might do things differently. She smiled, a genuine smile this time. Deal. We sealed our agreement with fresh lemonade instead of handshakes, and when Thomas and Dylan returned, they found us comparing notes on Emma's recent language explosion. As the afternoon came to a close and I prepared to leave, Dylan wrapped his arms around my waist. You'll come back soon, right, Grandma? Not like before when it was always next time, but next time never happened. Children have an uncanny ability to distill complex situations to their essence. I looked at Thomas and Vanessa over his head, a silent question in my eyes. Grandma will be back very soon, Vanessa answered firmly. In fact, you and Emma are going to stay at her house next weekend. Would you like that? Dylan's whoop of delight was answer enough. Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in months. The situation wasn't perfect. Money had indeed changed things, as Gerald had warned. But perhaps it had simply accelerated a necessary conversation. What mattered was that the door that had been closing was now opening again. And I would make sure it stayed that way. Not through financial leverage, but through the genuine rebuilding of trust and understanding between Vanessa and myself. After all, we shared something far more valuable than money. We both loved those children beyond measure. I spent the entire week preparing for my grandchildren's visit. Though I'd kept their rooms exactly as they were from previous stays, both needed refreshing. For Dylan, I replaced the space-themed bedding he'd outgrown with dinosaur prints, his current obsession according to Thomas. For Emma, I added a small nightlight that projected stars onto the ceiling, anticipating she might feel anxious in an unfamiliar bed. The pantry was stocked with their favorite snacks, the refrigerator filled with ingredients for meals I knew they enjoyed. I even dug out some of Thomas's old toys from the attic, wooden blocks and a train set that had survived decades in storage. You're nesting like a mother hen, Eleanor commented when she stopped by on Friday morning. My bridge partner had come bearing a homemade apple pie for the children's visit. Is it too much? I gestured at the craft supplies laid out on the dining table. I thought we could make bird feeders tomorrow. Eleanor laughed, setting the pie on the counter. It's perfect, Margaret. Those children are lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, I replied, meaning it. I never thought I'd get this second chance. Eleanor had been my confidant throughout the months of estrangement, listening to my heartache when visits were canceled and celebrations happened without me. Now she studied me with knowing eyes. Just be careful, she warned gently. Don't overwhelm them, or yourself. This isn't about making up for lost time in one weekend. She was right, of course. I had a tendency to overcompensate, a trait that had probably contributed to the tension with Vanessa in the first place. I'll dial it back, I promised, putting away some of the more elaborate craft supplies. Simple and comfortable. That's what they need. Thomas arrived with the children at 4 that afternoon. He carried their small suitcases while Dylan bounded up the front steps, already chattering about a lizard he'd spotted in the garden. Now remember, Thomas was saying as I opened the door. Grandma has house rules just like we do. I expect you both to be on your best behavior. We will, Dylan promised solemnly, before immediately asking if he could have a cookie. I laughed, ushering them inside. Dinner first, then cookies, but you can help me make the pasta if you'd like. Emma, clutching her ever-present stuffed bunny, stayed close to Thomas until she spotted the dollhouse in the corner of the living room, a vintage piece Gerald had restored years ago. Her eyes widened with interest. That was your daddy's when he was little, I told her, though he preferred to send toy cars crashing through the rooms rather than play properly. Dad played with dolls? Dylan asked, his face scrunching in confusion. Thomas ruffled his son's hair. It was a different kind of playing, buddy. More like creating disasters. Grandma was very patient with me. It was a small moment, but significant. Thomas acknowledging his own childhood imperfections, creating space for the children to be themselves rather than perfectly behaved guests. After showing the children to their rooms and helping them unpack, Thomas prepared to leave. I walked him to the door while Dylan and Emma explored the backyard. Vanessa wanted me to give you these, he said, handing me a sheet of paper. Emma's routine and some emergency contacts. She's a bit anxious. It's the first time Emma's stayed overnight without us since she was an infant. I scanned the neatly typed schedule. Bedtime at 7:30, bath before bed, specific instructions for her favorite bedtime story, what to do if she woke in the night. The meticulousness spoke volumes about Vanessa's need for control, something I recognized in myself. I'll follow it to the letter, I promised. Thomas looked relieved. This means a lot, Mom. Not just the house help, but this. He gestured vaguely toward the backyard where the children were examining my bird bath. Trying again. I touched his arm. Family is worth trying for, no matter how many attempts it takes. After he left, we settled into an evening of simple pleasures. The children helped make dinner, taking turns stirring the pasta sauce and sprinkling cheese. Dylan recounted elaborate stories about school while Emma arranged and rearranged the dollhouse furniture with intense concentration. Bath time went smoothly, though Emma insisted I sing the same song 3 times before she would allow me to wash her hair. By 8 o'clock, both children were tucked into their beds. Dylan already half asleep after 2 bedtime stories, Emma clutching her bunny and watching the stars move across her ceiling. Grandma? She asked as I prepared to leave her room. Do you have money? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean, sweetheart? Mommy told Daddy that Grandma has lots and lots of money now, she said, her innocent eyes fixed on mine. Is that why we can see you again? My heart constricted. Had they discussed my financial situation in front of the children? Or had Emma, perceptive despite her young age, simply overheard adult conversations not meant for her? I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. I have enough money for what I need, yes. But that's not why you're here, Emma. You're here because I love you very much, and your mommy and daddy know how much I've missed you. She seemed to consider this, her small brow furrowed in thought. Mommy was mad before. She said you were interfering? I suggested gently. She nodded. But now she's not mad anymore. People sometimes disagree, especially grown-ups, I explained. But that doesn't mean they stop loving each other. Your mommy and I are learning to understand each other better. This seemed to satisfy her. She yawned widely, her eyelids growing heavy. I like being here, she murmured as she drifted toward sleep. I like having you here, I whispered, stroking her curls. Later, after checking that both children were sleeping soundly, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, reflecting on Emma's innocent question. Children absorb so much more than adults. Realize, interpreting the world through fragments of overheard conversations and subtle shifts in family dynamics. Had my relationship with my grandchildren truly been restored, or had it merely been purchased? The thought troubled me deeply. I wanted genuine healing, not a transactional arrangement based on my newfound financial leverage. My phone chimed with a text message from Vanessa. Just checking in. Are the kids okay? Emma usually wakes around 2 a.m. for water. I smiled at the transparency of the message, a mother anxious about her children, but making an effort to trust me with their care. Both sleeping peacefully, I replied. Emma showed me the dollhouse. Dylan helped make dinner. We're having a wonderful time. After a moment, another message appeared. Thank you. For everything. The simplicity of those words, coming from Vanessa, felt like a genuine olive branch. Perhaps there was hope for a relationship built on something more meaningful than financial convenience after all. The weekend unfolded with a gentle rhythm. We made bird feeders on Saturday morning, pine cones, rolled in peanut butter and seeds that we hung from the maple tree in my backyard. The afternoon brought a trip to the local park, where Dylan demonstrated his impressive climbing skills, and Emma conquered her fear of the slide with my patient encouragement. Sunday arrived too quickly. As we packed their belongings, Dylan asked if they could leave some toys at my house for next time. The casual certainty of his words, next time, brought a lump to my throat. Of course you can, I assured him. This is your space too. When Thomas and Vanessa arrived to collect them, I was surprised to see Vanessa step out of the car and approach the house. She'd been notably absent at drop-off. How were they? She asked, her voice carefully neutral as the children showed Thomas a bird feeder they'd insisted on saving for him. Wonderful, I said honestly. Emma is remarkably articulate for her age. A small smile of pride crossed Vanessa's face. We read to her every night. Thomas thinks it's making a difference with her vocabulary. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke again. The bank approved our mortgage yesterday. With your contribution to the down payment, we're all set to close on schedule. That's excellent news. She nodded, then surprised me by meeting my gaze directly. I meant what I said before, about starting over. This isn't just about the money. Seeing the kids so happy this weekend, it's a reminder of what we've been denying them. And you. It was the most direct acknowledgement she'd offered about the months of separation. Not quite an apology, but a recognition of what had been lost. Thank you for saying that, I replied softly. It means a great deal to me. As they prepared to leave, Emma wrapped her arms around my legs in a fierce hug. Can we come back tomorrow? She asked. I smiled, kneeling to her level. Not tomorrow, sweetheart, but soon, very soon. I looked up at Vanessa, a silent question in my eyes. How about next Sunday for dinner? She suggested, answering my unspoken query. We could come after Dylan's t-ball game. You could watch him play if you'd like. The invitation, extended voluntarily without prompting, felt like a genuine breakthrough. I'd love that, I said, working to keep my voice steady despite the emotion welling inside me. As their car pulled away, the children waving frantically through the rear window, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The weekend had been more than just a scheduled visitation or a financial transaction. It had been a step toward rebuilding what had been broken. Not just for me, but for all of us. Money had opened the door, yes. But what would sustain us going forward would be the genuine connections we were carefully, tentatively reconstructing. Emma's innocent question echoed in my mind. Is that why we can see you again? Perhaps it had been, initially. But what mattered now was ensuring that the relationship we rebuilt was based on something far more valuable than my net worth. The next few weeks brought a delicate dance of rebuilding relationships and establishing new patterns. True to her word, Vanessa included me in Dylan's t-ball game, texting me the schedule and saving me a seat in the bleachers beside her. I cheered appropriately when Dylan got to second base, careful not to overshadow his parents' enthusiasm. Small steps, measured responses. I was also invited to help with the moving process. Not just watching the children while boxes were packed, but actively participating in setting up their new home. I spent one afternoon organizing the kitchen with Vanessa, our conversation flowing more naturally than I would have expected as we decided where dishes should go and which cabinets would hold which supplies. Thomas says you're an excellent organizer, she commented as I devised a system for their spice rack. He still talks about how you color-coded his school supplies every year. I laughed. He complained bitterly about it at the time. I had no idea he'd come to appreciate it. There's a lot he appreciates about you, she said, handing me another set of dishes to arrange. Sometimes I think he's been caught in an impossible position these past months. It was the closest she'd come to acknowledging Thomas's role in our estrangement, how he'd been torn between wife and mother, trying unsuccessfully to please both. He loves you very much, I replied carefully. His loyalty should be to you and the children. I've never wanted to come between you. She nodded, seemingly appreciative of my understanding. I know that now. I think I was insecure before, afraid he was comparing my parenting to yours and finding me lacking. Vanessa, I said gently, every generation parents differently. My mother thought I was too permissive with Thomas. I'm sure I would have found plenty to question about her methods if she'd been actively involved in his childhood. This earned a small smile. My mother thinks we're too strict, especially about screen time. See? It's the circle of parenting life. Our laughter felt like another small barrier dissolving. The moving day itself was organized chaos. I arrived early with breakfast for everyone, including the moving crew, which earned me appreciative nods from the burly men carrying furniture. By midday, the old house was empty, and the new one was filling with boxes and beloved possessions. Mom, Can. You take the kids to get lunch? Thomas asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. The movers are ahead of schedule, and we need to get the bedrooms set up before nap time. Of course, I replied, already gathering Emma's diaper bag and Dylan's jacket. Any preferences on where we go? Wherever's easiest, Vanessa called from upstairs. Just not fast food, please. Dylan gets too hyper from the sugar. There it was, a request, not a command. A preference stated without criticism implied if I chose differently. Progress. I took the children to a small cafe with a garden patio. Dylan colored the children's menu while Emma arranged sugar packets in meticulous rows. I snapped a photo of them and sent it to Thomas and Vanessa with the caption, "Lunch bunch doing fine." Vanessa replied almost immediately. Thanks, Margaret. The movers just brought in Emma's bed. Making progress here, too. The casual update, the use of my name rather than a formal thank you. These small gestures spoke volumes about our evolving relationship. When we returned to the new house, I helped the children explore their rooms and unpack their most treasured possessions. By evening, exhaustion had claimed us all. Thomas ordered pizza, and we ate sitting on the floor of the half-furnished living room, boxes serving as makeshift tables. A toast, Thomas declared, raising his paper cup of soda. To our new home, made possible by family coming together. We clinked our cups solemnly, even Emma participating with her sippy cup of milk. I caught Vanessa's eye across the impromptu picnic, and we shared a small smile of mutual understanding. The acknowledgement of my financial contribution was there, in Thomas's words, but so was something more meaningful, the recognition that we were, despite our differences, a family. As the weeks passed, I was carefully conscious of not overstepping. I accepted invitations, but rarely initiated them, letting Thomas and Vanessa set the pace for our reunification. The college funds for the children were established, the additional money for the house down payment transferred. The financial arrangements were handled cleanly, without ongoing reminders or implied obligations. One Tuesday morning in mid-June, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Vanessa standing on my porch, alone and looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Vanessa," I said, surprised. "Is everything all right?" "The children—" "They're fine," she assured me quickly. "They're at summer day camp. She hesitated. "Could we talk?" I invited her in, offering coffee, which she accepted with visible relief, as if grateful for the familiar social routine. We settled in the kitchen, morning sun streaming through the windows that overlooked my garden. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, cupping her hands around the mug. "About our situation, about how things changed after we learned about your financial position." I tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. "The thing is," she continued, "I don't want our relationship to be based on what you can give us materially. It's not right. And it's not the example I want to set for the children." "I understand," I said cautiously. "And I've been careful not to use money as leverage." "No, you've been very respectful about that," she interrupted. "Almost too respectful. Like you're walking on eggshells around us." She took a deep breath. "What I'm trying to say is that I've realized something important. The money matters, yes. It will help secure the children's future and has given us a beautiful home. But what matters more is what we almost lost permanently, your relationship with the children." "With us?" I waited, sensing there was more. "Last night, Dylan asked me to read from a book of children's poems you gave him. He said, 'Grandma reads it the best way, with different voices for all the characters.' And I realized he'd almost forgotten those special moments with you. We almost took that away from him, from both of them, because of my insecurities and stubbornness." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, Margaret, not just for using the children as pawns, but for not recognizing your value to them beyond any financial consideration." The apology, unexpected and heartfelt, touched me deeply. "Thank you, Vanessa. That means more than you know." She nodded, composing herself. "I have a proposal. Thomas and I have been talking. We'd like to establish a regular schedule, beyond just spontaneous invitations. Sunday dinners at our house, Wednesday afternoons with you after the children's day camp, and one weekend overnight each month." It was more than I'd dared hope for, a structured place in their lives, not dependent on convenience or immediate need. "We want this to be our new normal," she continued. "Not because of your financial support, but because it's right for everyone, especially the children." "I'd like that very much," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She smiled, relieved. "There's one more thing. Thomas has a conference in Chicago next month, 3 days. I'd planned to take time off work to stay with the children, but would you consider staying at our house instead? It would give me a chance to accompany Thomas, and the children would be in their familiar environment." The trust implicit in this request was enormous, not just childcare, but full parental responsibility in their own home. "I'd be honored," I said simply. "Good." She seemed relieved, as if she'd been unsure of my response. "The children will be thrilled." As we finished our coffee, our conversation drifted to other topics: plans for the children's summer activities. A landscape designer Vanessa was considering for the new backyard, a book we'd both recently read. The ease between us felt new and fragile, but genuine. When she rose to leave, she paused at the door. You know, when we first learned about your financial situation, I felt embarrassed. Like we'd only come to you when we needed something, after months of pushing you away. It didn't feel good. Realizing what that said about us, about me. We all make mistakes, I offered. What matters is how we correct them. She nodded thoughtfully. I want you to know that even if circumstances changed, financially I mean, this new arrangement would stand. Your place in our family isn't contingent on your bank account. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Acknowledgement that our reconciliation had transcended its financial beginnings to become something more authentic. Thank you for saying that, I said. Though I hope we never have to test it. She laughed softly. Me too. After she left, I sat in my garden, reflecting on the surprising turn our relationship had taken. The money had indeed changed things, as Gerald had predicted. It had opened a door that might have remained closed otherwise. But what we were building now went beyond financial considerations. True family bonds couldn't be bought, only earned, through mutual respect, clear communication, and genuine care. We were making progress on all fronts. That evening, I received a text from Thomas with a photo attached. It showed Dylan and Emma in their new backyard, planting flowers in a small garden patch. They insisted on making a grandma garden with all your favorite flowers, the message read. Dylan remembered you love daisies. Emma added purple ones because grandma is pretty like purple. I smiled at the image of their small hands patting soil around the seedlings, their faces intent with concentration. This was wealth beyond measure, the love of my grandchildren, the healing of family wounds, the promise of a future together. Some things, it turned out, were more valuable than even $2 million. July arrived with sweltering heat and the sweet chaos of summer routines. Our new schedule had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Wednesday afternoons at the park or library with the children, Sunday dinners at Thomas and Vanessa's house, and the promised monthly overnight stays that Dylan counted down to with eager anticipation. The approaching 3-day stay at their house while Thomas and Vanessa attended the Chicago conference brought a different kind of excitement. This wasn't just babysitting, it was being trusted with full parental duties in their own home. I'd made lists, reviewed schedules, and memorized emergency contacts with the thoroughness of someone preparing for a crucial examination. You're overthinking this, Eleanor told me as we sat in my garden, sipping iced tea the day before I was to move temporarily into Thomas and Vanessa's house. You raised a child successfully. These are just 3 days with grandchildren who adore you. It's different now, I insisted. Parenting has changed. There are new rules, new approaches. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Children still need love, boundaries, and cookies. That hasn't changed since the dawn of time. I laughed, grateful for her grounding perspective. You're right. I'm making this more complicated than it needs to be. It's understandable, she said more gently. This feels like a test, doesn't it? A chance to prove to Vanessa that you can respect her methods while caring for her children. Once again, Eleanor had articulated exactly what I was feeling. Yes, and I don't want to disappoint anyone, especially the children. You won't, she assured me. Just be their grandmother. That's who they need. The next morning, I arrived at Thomas and Vanessa's house with a small suitcase and a container of homemade blueberry muffins for breakfast. The children greeted me with enthusiasm, Dylan showing me a complex Lego structure he'd been working on, Emma insisting I admire her new sandals that twinkled with each step. Vanessa was in the kitchen, finalizing a color-coded schedule that covered the refrigerator door. I've written everything down. Camp drop-off times, Dylan's play date on Thursday, Emma's favorite lunch options. It's very thorough, I said, genuinely impressed by her organizational skills. We'll follow it as closely as possible. She looked relieved. I've never been away from Emma for this long before. We'll be fine, I assured her, and you'll only be a phone call away if we need anything. Thomas appeared, carrying their suitcases downstairs. The car service will be here in 20 minutes, Van, he reminded her gently. She nodded, then surprised me by pulling a small gift bag from a drawer. This is for you, she said, handing it to me. Just a small thank you for doing this. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with 2 charms, a tiny book and a garden trowel. The book is for all the stories you read them, Vanessa explained. And the trowel because you've been teaching them about gardening. Dylan helped choose them. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched me deeply. This wasn't an expensive piece, offering born of financial obligation. This was a personal acknowledgement of the specific ways I connected with her children. It's perfect, I said, fastening it around my wrist. Thank you. The goodbyes were predictably emotional. Emma clung to Vanessa, suddenly unsure about this new arrangement despite her earlier excitement. Dylan maintained a brave face until the last moment, when he ran after the car for one more high five from his father. They'll be fine in an hour, I promised as Vanessa looked back anxiously from the departing car. She nodded, though her expression remained worried. True to prediction, the children's distress faded quickly once we settled into activities. We baked cookies in the morning, using the opportunity to practice counting and measuring. After lunch, we visited the neighborhood pool where Dylan proudly demonstrated his improving swimming skills while Emma and I splashed in the shallow end. That evening, as I tucked them into their beds, I realized how precious this extended time with them truly was. Not just the fun activities or special treats, but these quiet moments of connection, helping Emma find her favorite pajamas, listening to Dylan's elaborate recounting of a dream he'd had about dinosaurs, witnessing the small rituals that shaped their daily lives. The next 2 days unfolded without major incidents. We adhered to Vanessa's schedule while finding space for spontaneous joy, a sudden summer rain shower that we danced in, an impromptu picnic in the backyard Fort Thomas had recently built. On the final evening before their parents' return, I decided to try something special. After dinner, I gathered the children in the living room. I have some pictures to show you, I said, pulling out a small album I'd brought along. These are of your daddy when he was your age, Dylan. Their eyes widened as I showed them photographs of Thomas riding his first bicycle, building sandcastles at the beach, dressed in his kindergarten Halloween costume. Daddy was little? Emma asked in wonderment, her small finger tracing Thomas's 5-year-old face. Just as little as you once, I confirmed. And just as silly sometimes. Dylan was fascinated by the continuity between generations. He liked dinosaurs too, he exclaimed, pointing to a picture of Thomas with a plastic Tyrannosaurus. He did. And he was always building things, just like you do with your Legos. As we turned the pages, I shared simple stories from Thomas's childhood. How he'd once tried to help by washing the dog with bubble bath, his determination to sleep in a tent in the backyard until a thunderstorm changed his mind, the time he'd attempted to mail himself to his grandparents by climbing into a large box. The children giggled at these glimpses of their father as a child, their eyes bright with the delight of this new perspective. Were you mad when Daddy did silly things? Dylan asked, suddenly serious. Sometimes I was worried, I admitted. But mostly I understood that he was learning and growing, just like you are. Does Mommy get mad when we're silly? He pressed, revealing what might be a concern beneath his question. Mommies and daddies worry because they love you so much, I explained carefully. Sometimes that worry might look like being upset, but it's always because they care about keeping you safe and helping you grow up well. He nodded, seeming satisfied with this explanation. I think you were a good mommy to Daddy, he declared. I tried my best, I said, unexpectedly moved by his assessment. Just like your mommy tries her best with you, That night, after the children were asleep, I texted Vanessa a photo I'd taken of the kids looking at the album, with the caption, "Enjoying stories about their daddy as a little boy. They're fascinated to learn he wasn't always a grown-up, her." Response came quickly. "That's so special. Thank you for sharing family history with them. We're heading home tomorrow afternoon. Everything still good?" "Everything is perfect," I replied. "They're wonderful children. You and Thomas should be very proud." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. The final breakfast, packing up, my belongings, making sure the house was spotless before their return. The children helped clean up their rooms with minimal complaints, incentivized by the promise of watching their favorite movie afterward. Thomas and Vanessa arrived home just after lunch, looking refreshed and happy. The children raced to greet them, talking over each other in their eagerness to share all the adventures we'd had. We made cookies and went swimming, and Grandma showed us pictures of Daddy when he was little, and he liked dinosaurs just like me and me. Vanessa laughed, kneeling to hug them both while looking up at me with genuine gratitude. "It sounds like you had a wonderful time." "We did," I confirmed. "They were absolute delights." Later, as I prepared to leave, Vanessa walked me to my car, while Thomas helped the children organize the small crafts we'd made. "I can't thank you enough," she said. "This was the first real break Thomas and I have had since Emma was born." "It was my pleasure, truly." She hesitated, then spoke in a lower voice. "I've been thinking about something. We haven't discussed it with the children yet, but Thomas and I are considering trying for another baby next year." The confidence of this personal revelation wasn't lost on me. This wasn't casual information. This was Vanessa including me in their family planning, acknowledging my place in their lives for the long term. "That's wonderful news," I said sincerely. "You're wonderful parents." "We'd want you involved from the beginning," she continued. "No more of this keeping Grandma at a distance nonsense. You're too important to them, to all of us." I felt a swell of emotion at her words, not just the inclusion they represented, but the acknowledgement of past mistakes and the commitment to a different future. "I'd like that very much," I managed to say. As I drove home, I reflected on how far we'd come in just a few months, from being systematically excluded from my grandchildren's lives to being trusted with their care, from strained conversations to honest sharing of future plans. The transformation was remarkable. Yes, my financial situation had opened the door to reconciliation. But what had walked through that door was something money couldn't buy: genuine understanding, mutual respect, and the rekindling of family bonds that would outlast any bank account. That evening, I called my financial advisor. "Margaret," he greeted me warmly. "How are things with the family situation?" "Better than I could have hoped," I replied. "Which is why I'm calling. I'd like to make some changes to my estate planning." "I thought you might," he said, not sounding surprised. "What did you have in mind?" "I still want substantial trusts for my grandchildren's education," I explained. "But I'd like to establish something new as well. A family vacation fund that can be accessed while I'm still alive. Something we can all enjoy together." "Creating memories," he observed. "Often the best investment." "Exactly. And I'd like to explore options for helping Thomas and Vanessa with their retirement planning. Nothing that creates dependency, but something that demonstrates my commitment to their long-term security." We discussed specifics for nearly an hour: prudent allocations, appropriate structures, ways to provide financial support that empowered rather than enabled. Throughout the conversation, I felt a growing certainty that I was making the right decisions. Money had indeed changed our family dynamics, as Gerald had warned, but perhaps the change wasn't entirely negative. Perhaps it had simply accelerated, a necessary evolution, forcing uncomfortable truths into the open where they could finally be addressed. My phone chimed with an incoming text as I was finishing the call. It was from Thomas, with a photo attached, the children in their pajamas, clutching the small photo album I'd shared with them. They insisted on looking at your old pictures again before bed. His message read. Dylan says he wants to hear more. Stories about when I was little the next time you come over. Thank you for sharing that with them, Mom. Some things are too valuable to lose. I smiled at his unintentional echo of my own thoughts. Some things indeed were too valuable to lose. Family connections, shared histories, the simple joy of belonging to each other. These were the true assets I'd nearly lost, and now had miraculously regained. No balance sheet could possibly capture their worth. Summer flowed into autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and new routines. Dylan started first grade with the excitement of a child ready to conquer the world, while Emma began part-time preschool 3 mornings a week. Our Wednesday afternoon visits shifted to accommodate school schedules, becoming Wednesday evening dinners at my house where homework was completed at the kitchen table before playtime. One such Wednesday in early October, I was helping Dylan with his math worksheet while Emma colored beside us, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. "Grandma," Dylan said, looking up from his addition problems, "are you rich?" The question, asked with a child's directness, caught me off guard. "That's an interesting question," I replied carefully. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, erasing a number with focused intensity. "Joey at school says his grandma is poor because she lives in a tiny apartment. And Marcus says his grandpa is rich because he has a boat. I was wondering which one you are." I considered how to respond to this innocent categorization. "I suppose I have enough money for what I need," I said finally. "But being rich isn't just about money." "What else is it about?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Well, I feel rich because I have people I love who love me back. I have a home that makes me happy, memories that make me smile, and enough good health to enjoy it all. That's a different kind of richness." He nodded solemnly, processing this perspective. "But you do have money too, right? That's why you could help Mom and Dad buy our house." So they had discussed the financial aspects with him, at least partially. I wondered how much he truly understood. "Yes, I do have money too," I acknowledged. "Your grandpa was very careful with our savings, and when he died, he left me well provided for." "That was nice of Grandpa," Dylan said, returning to his homework with the matter settled in his mind. That evening after the children had gone home, I found myself reflecting on Dylan's question. Children have an uncanny ability to cut through, pretense to the heart of matters adults carefully dance around. The financial aspect of our family's reconciliation was something we rarely discussed directly anymore, yet it remained an unspoken foundation beneath our rebuilt relationships. The following Sunday dinner at Thomas and Vanessa's house brought an unexpected announcement. "We have some news," Thomas said as we finished the main course, exchanging a meaningful glance with Vanessa. "We weren't planning to share this broadly for another month or so, but we wanted Mom to be among the first to know." Vanessa smiled, a mixture of excitement and nervousness on her face. "I'm pregnant. We're expecting a baby in early May." "Congratulations," I exclaimed, genuinely delighted. Though Vanessa had mentioned they were considering another child, I hadn't realized they were already trying. "This is wonderful news." "We're going to have a baby?" Dylan asked, eyes wide with the implications. "A real one?" Emma added skeptically. The adults laughed, and Thomas explained the concept of a new sibling to the children while I watched Vanessa. She looked radiant despite the tiredness around her eyes that suggested early pregnancy wasn't being entirely kind to her. "How are you feeling?" I asked quietly when Thomas was occupied with the children's questions. "Exhausted," she admitted. "And nervous. 3 children feels like a big step." "It is," I agreed. "But you're not doing it alone this time," she gave me a grateful look. "That's actually part of what we wanted to discuss with you. With my working hours and the new baby coming, we're going to need more regular help with the children next year. We'd like to know if you'd be interested in having them with you 2 afternoons a week after school." The offer took me by surprise, not just the practical arrangement, but what it represented. this wasn't a request born of immediate financial need or crisis. This was Vanessa actively choosing to incorporate me into their family's regular functioning, planning for my involvement months in advance. "I'd be delighted," I said sincerely. "You know I treasure any time with them." "We'd want to pay you, of course," Thomas added. I shook my head firmly. "Absolutely not. This isn't a transaction. This is family helping family." Vanessa surprised me by reaching across the table to touch my hand. "We know you don't need the money, Margaret, but we want this to be a respectful arrangement, not us taking advantage of your generosity again." I understood her concerns but held firm. "The greatest gift you can give me is time with my grandchildren. I don't need or want payment for that privilege." After some discussion, we compromised. They wouldn't pay me directly but would contribute to a fund for special activities I could do with the children. Museum trips, theater performances, whatever educational experiences we might enjoy together. As we finalized these plans, I was struck by how naturally we had moved into this new phase of our relationship. The careful distance of earlier months had given way to genuine collaboration, each of us secure enough in our roles to offer and accept help without fear of overstepping or being taken advantage of. Later, as I helped clear the dinner table, Thomas pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You know, Mom, this arrangement will be a huge help financially, too. Daycare costs for 3 children would be astronomical." "I'm happy to help in any way I can," I assured him. He hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "There's something else. Vanessa's been having a hard time at work lately. Her company is restructuring and her position might be eliminated. We haven't told anyone yet, but with the baby coming—" "Are you concerned about money?" I asked directly, recognizing the worry in his expression. "Not immediately," he replied. "Your help with the house down payment gave us a much better mortgage rate than we would have qualified for otherwise. But if Vanessa loses her job, things will be tight with a new baby." I nodded, understanding his concerns. "Thomas, you know, I'm here if you need help. But may I suggest something?" "Of course. Don't jump immediately to financial assistance. Sometimes the most valuable help comes in other forms. If Vanessa loses her job, perhaps what she'll need most is time. Time to find the right new position, time to spend with the new baby, time to figure out what she truly wants for this next phase of her career." He looked thoughtful. "You mean like a sabbatical?" "Exactly. Sometimes a step back provides clarity. And if I can help provide the security for her to take that time, I'd be happy to do so." "You've changed," Thomas observed with a small smile. "You used to always try to solve problems directly, usually by rolling up your sleeves and doing things yourself." I laughed softly. "I'm learning that supporting someone's journey is different from trying to map their route for them. It took me long enough, but I'm getting there." He hugged me impulsively. "You're getting there indeed, and we're lucky to have you with us on the journey." The conversation with Thomas crystallized something I'd been feeling for months. My relationship with my family had fundamentally transformed, not just healing from the painful estrangement, but evolving into something more mature and balanced than what had existed before. The following week brought unexpected news. I arrived home from grocery shopping to find a certified letter waiting for me. Opening it with curiosity, I discovered documents from the estate of Henrietta Blackwell, Gerald's cousin whom I'd met perhaps 3 times in our marriage. She had passed away 6 months earlier at the age of 92, and apparently had left me a portion of her estate. I called the lawyer whose contact information was included, expecting to learn about a small bequest or family keepsake. "Mrs. Wilson," the attorney greeted me after I identified myself. "Thank you for calling. I've been handling Henrietta Blackwell's estate matters." "Yes, I received your letter. I was quite surprised. I barely knew Henrietta." "She spoke very highly of you," he replied. "She remembered your kindness when her husband passed, and apparently Gerald had kept in touch with her over the years. That was news to me." Gerald had never mentioned ongoing communication with his elderly cousin. The bequest is quite substantial, the lawyer continued. Henrietta had no children, and after providing for her sister's grandchildren, she left 30% of her estate to you. That amounts to approximately $850,000 after taxes. I nearly dropped the phone. I'm sorry, could you repeat that figure? He did, and I sat down heavily on the nearest chair. Nearly another $1 million appearing out of nowhere. My net worth would now approach $3 million. After concluding the call with promises to sign and return the necessary documents, I sat in my living room, contemplating this unexpected development. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as my family and I had reached a place where money was no longer the central factor in our relationship, my financial situation had improved even further. What would I do with this windfall? The practical options were obvious. Increase the grandchildren's college funds, enhance my retirement security, perhaps donate to causes I believed in. But beyond these pragmatic considerations, the inheritance offered something more valuable, an opportunity to demonstrate that our family's healing transcended financial motivations. That evening, I called Thomas and invited him and Vanessa to dinner at my house that weekend, without the children. There's something I'd like to discuss with you both, I explained, keeping my tone light to avoid causing concern. They arrived Saturday evening, curious about this unusual adults-only meeting. After a relaxed dinner, I brought coffee to the Yao living room along with a folder similar to the one I'd shown them months ago. I've received some unexpected news, I began, explaining about Henrietta's bequest and the substantial inheritance heading my way. Thomas looked stunned. Mom, that's incredible. I had no idea Dad's cousin was wealthy. Neither did I admitted. But her generosity has presented me with both an opportunity and a decision. I opened the folder and showed them the plans I'd outlined. I'd like your input on this. They leaned forward, examining the document I'd prepared with my financial advisor. It detailed a 3-part allocation of the inheritance. 1/3 to be added to the existing college funds for the grandchildren, including provisions for the new baby. 1/3 to establish a charitable foundation focusing on early childhood, literacy programs, and 1/3 to create a family legacy fund. What's a family legacy fund? Vanessa asked, looking up from the papers. It's something my advisor and I developed together, I explained. It's a trust that would provide matching funds for family projects that benefit the community. For instance, if you or the children wanted to support a cause or create something beneficial for others, the fund would match your contributions or volunteer hours with financial support. So it encourages giving back, Thomas observed, rather than just receiving. Exactly. I want my grandchildren to understand that wealth brings responsibility as well as privilege. This creates a structure where they can learn that lesson through active participation. Vanessa studied the proposal thoughtfully. I really like this, Margaret. It's forward-thinking without being controlling. You're providing resources but also encouraging values. That's the intent, I acknowledged. But I wanted your perspective as their parents. This will shape how they view money and giving as they grow up. What followed was one of the most meaningful conversations of my life. For nearly 2 hours, we discussed hopes for the children's future, values we wanted to instill, and the complex relationship between financial security and personal responsibility. There was no tension, no underlying current of expectation or obligation, just 3 adults who loved the same children, working together to create something meaningful for their future. As the evening concluded, Vanessa surprised me with a hug, not the perfunctory greeting or farewell embraces we'd recently established, but a genuine expression of connection. Thank you, she said simply. For the inheritance plans? I asked. She shook her head. For showing us what true generosity looks like. It's not just about money. It's about giving people the space to become their best selves. Her words touched something profound in me. Perhaps that was what had been missing in our earlier relationship. Not just financial transparency, but the emotional generosity to allow each other to be authentically who we were, imperfections and all. As Thomas and Vanessa prepared to leave, Thomas asked a question that caught me off guard. "Mom, are you happy? Not just with the family situation, but with your life overall?" The question made me pause and reflect. Was I happy? After the painful estrangement, the financial revelation, the careful rebuilding of trust, where did I truly stand? Yes, I said finally, realizing as I spoke that it was absolutely true. I'm happier than I've been in years. I have meaningful connections with you all, purpose through the volunteer work I've started, and the joy of watching my grandchildren grow. What more could I ask for? Thomas smiled, seeming satisfied with my answer. Good, because we want you to be happy too. This isn't just about what you can do for us. It's about all of us thriving together. As I watched them drive away into the autumn evening, I reflected on the extraordinary journey we'd traveled. What had begun with heartache and separation had transformed into something richer and more authentic than I could have imagined. Money had indeed changed our family dynamics, opening doors that might have remained closed otherwise. But what had walked through those doors wasn't bought or paid for. It was earned through honest conversations, mutual respect, and the recognition that our strongest bonds existed beyond the balance sheet. The true wealth, I realized, wasn't in my bank accounts or investment portfolios. It was in Dylan's gap-toothed smile when he mastered a difficult math problem, in Emma's small hand slipping trustingly into mine, in the baby who would join our family in the spring. It was in Vanessa's growing confidence in our relationship, in Thomas's renewed connection to his childhood memories, in the promising future we were building together. These were assets no financial statement could capture, and none could truly diminish. They were the priceless treasures that would outlast any inheritance, enriching our lives in ways that mattered most. Winter descended with unexpected ferocity that year. By mid-December, our town was blanketed in snow, transforming the landscape into a scene from a holiday card. I found myself busier than I'd been in years, volunteering at the children's school, holiday fair, helping Vanessa prepare the nursery for the new baby, and finalizing the paperwork for Henrietta's inheritance and the family legacy fund. The Christmas season brought a stark contrast to the previous year's painful exclusion. This year, I was included in every aspect of the holiday preparations. Vanessa had asked me to help bake cookies with the children, specifically requesting my gingerbread recipe that Thomas had loved as a boy. We spent a flower-dusted afternoon, creating festive shapes while Christmas music played in the background. "Grandma, will the new baby be here for Christmas?" Emma asked as she pressed a star-shaped cutter into the dough with determined concentration. "Not this Christmas, sweetheart," I explained. "The baby will arrive in spring when the flowers start blooming." "I hope it's a brother," Dylan declared, carefully arranging raisin buttons on his gingerbread man. "I already have a sister." "Well, we'll find out soon," I said, exchanging an amused glance with Vanessa. They had opted for a surprise rather than learning the baby's gender ahead of time. Vanessa rested a hand on her growing belly. At 5 months, her pregnancy was clearly visible now. "Whatever we get, I have a feeling this little one is going to be very loved." The moment felt precious in its ordinary domesticity, so different from the tension and separation of a year ago. As we continued baking, my phone chimed with a message from Eleanor. "Terrible timing, but I've thrown my back out. Doctor says no driving for at least a week. Could you possibly pick up my granddaughter from the airport tomorrow? Her flight gets in at 2 p.m. Eleanor's only granddaughter, Sophia, was flying in from college for the holidays. I'd met her several times over the years. A bright young woman studying engineering on the West Coast. "Of course," I replied immediately. "Send me the flight details. Happy to help. Everything okay?" Vanessa asked, noticing my distraction. I explained the situation, already mentally rearranging my schedule. I'll need to reschedule our shopping trip tomorrow. Eleanor's in quite a bit of pain, and Sophia doesn't know anyone else in town. Why don't you bring her here after you pick her up? Vanessa suggested. The kids would enjoy meeting her, and I'm making that vegetable soup you like for lunch anyway. There's plenty. The casual invitation, the easy inclusion of a stranger in their family plans, spoke volumes about how far we'd come. A year ago, every interaction had been fraught with tension and calculation. Now, spontaneous adjustments were made with genuine warmth. That's very kind, I said. I'll check if she's comfortable with that. The next day brought clear skies and sunshine that made the snow sparkle like diamonds. I arrived at the airport early, positioning myself near the arrival gate with a small sign bearing Sophia's name. Eleanor had texted a recent photo, so I recognized the tall young woman with curly brown hair as soon as she emerged. Sophia? I'm Margaret Wilson, Eleanor's friend. Mrs. Wilson, thank you so much for coming. She appeared tired from the long flight but smiled warmly. Grandma feels terrible about not being able to pick me up herself. Please, call me Margaret, and it's no trouble at all. Your grandmother has been a wonderful friend to me. I'm happy to help. As we drove from the airport, Sophia shared stories about her engineering program and summer internship plans. She had Eleanor's quick intelligence and warm laugh, and I found myself thoroughly enjoying her company. My daughter-in-law invited us for lunch if you're not too tired, I offered. They have 2 children who would be quite fascinated by a college student studying engineering. That sounds lovely, Sophia accepted. I'm actually starving. Airplane food isn't what it used to be. When we arrived at Thomas and Vanessa's house, Dylan immediately appointed himself tour guide, proudly showing Sophia his room and Lego creations, while Emma followed along, clutching her favorite doll. The children were enchanted by this college student who could explain how bridges stayed up and promised to help Dylan build a structurally sound blanket fort after lunch. During our meal, Thomas asked Sophia about her career plans. I'm hoping to work in sustainable building design, she explained, helping herself to more soup. Finding ways to make structures more environmentally friendly while still being beautiful and functional. That's fascinating, Vanessa commented. We've been thinking about adding solar panels to the house, but it's hard to know where to start. The conversation flowed easily, touching on topics from renewable energy to campus life. I watched with quiet pleasure as this impromptu gathering unfolded naturally, with none of the tension or performance that had characterized family interactions in the past. After lunch, true to her word, Sophia helped Dylan construct an impressive blanket fort in the living room, explaining principles of tension and support in terms a 6-year-old could understand. Emma was designated interior decorator, arranging pillows and stuffed animals with serious attention to detail. Your family is wonderful, Sophia told me as we prepared to leave. Thank you for including me today. They are wonderful, aren't they? I agreed, feeling a surge of gratitude for this reconciled relationship that now felt natural enough to share with others. As Christmas approached, Vanessa called with an unexpected question. Margaret, we've been talking about holiday plans. Would you be open to hosting Christmas dinner this year? With the pregnancy and the renovations we've been doing on the basement, our house is a bit chaotic, but we completely understand if it's too much to ask. I was momentarily speechless. After being excluded from their Christmas celebration, the previous year I was now being asked to host it. I'd be delighted, I managed to say. Are you sure you wouldn't rather go to a restaurant? You shouldn't be on your feet too much. Actually, we were hoping we could all cook together, she said. The kids have been talking about your kitchen and how they love baking with you. If we all pitch in, it won't be too much work for anyone. The suggestion brought tears to my eyes, not just the inclusion, but the thoughtfulness behind it, creating a collaborative celebration rather than placing burdens on any one person. Christmas Day arrived with gentle snowfall and the kind of hushed beauty that makes even the most ordinary neighborhood feel magical. I had decorated my house with care. A tree filled with ornaments collected over decades, garlands on the staircase, and candles in every window. The table was set with my grandmother's china, augmented by Thomas and Vanessa's flatware and glasses. Since my own set wasn't quite enough for the additional guests who would be joining us, Vanessa's parents, flying in from Colorado, and her brother's family visiting from Michigan. The house gradually filled with the delicious aromas of roasting, turkey and baking pies, along with the sound of Christmas music and children's excited voices. Dylan and Emma helped me arrange pine cones and holly on the mantelpiece, while Thomas and Vanessa's brother set up extra chairs in the dining room. Vanessa and her mother worked alongside me in the kitchen, the three of us finding an easy rhythm as we prepared side dishes and desserts. There was something profoundly healing about this multi-generational gathering in my home, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the warmth and laughter, erasing the echoes of last year's solitary holiday. This reminds me of holidays at my grandmother's house, Vanessa commented as she crimped the edges of a pie crust. Everyone working together, kids underfoot, too many cooks in the kitchen, but somehow it all works out. Those are the best kind of holidays, her mother agreed. The ones where no one person has to do everything. I caught Vanessa's eye across the kitchen island, a moment of shared understanding passing between us. How far we had come from the days of subtle competition and perceived criticism. Now we were partners in creating family memories, each contributing our strengths. Before dinner, we gathered in the living room for what Thomas announced was a new family tradition, a gratitude circle. Each person, even 3-year-old Emma, was invited to share something they were thankful for this year. When my turn came, I looked around at the faces of this expanded family group and felt a surge of emotion. I'm grateful for second chances, I said simply, for the opportunity to learn and grow, even at my age, and for all of you who have welcomed me back into the center of this beautiful family. Vanessa, seated across from me, wiped away a tear. When her turn came, she surprised me by addressing me directly. I'm grateful to you, Margaret, for your forgiveness, your generosity of spirit, and for teaching me that family relationships aren't competitions but collaborations. The honesty of her words in front of her parents and brother, this public acknowledgement of our difficult journey, felt like the final seal on our reconciliation. The meal that followed was joyous and slightly chaotic, with multiple conversations happening at once, children spilling drinks that were quickly mopped up without comment, second helpings passed around, and dessert served with coffee and exclamations of, "I couldn't possibly eat another bite," followed inevitably by, "Well, maybe just a small piece." As the evening wound down and guests began to disperse to their various accommodations, Thomas helped me load the dishwasher while Vanessa settled the overtired children in the guest room where they would spend the night. "Mom," Thomas said quietly, "I want you to know how much this means to all of us. Having Christmas here, with you at the center of things, it feels right. It feels right to me too," I admitted. Though I never could have imagined this outcome a year ago when I was sitting alone on Christmas, looking at photos of Emma's birthday celebration I hadn't been invited to. He winced at the reminder. We handled things so badly. I should have stood up more firmly, should have insisted. I shook my head, interrupting him gently. We all made mistakes. What matters is that we found our way back to each other. And not because of money or obligation, but because we genuinely want to be in each other's lives. The money did help, though, he acknowledged with a rueful smile. It forced conversations we might never have had otherwise. Perhaps, I conceded. But the heart of what we've built this past year goes far beyond financial considerations. We've created something authentic, something that would survive even if circumstances changed. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat, alone in my living room, illuminated only by the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree. The house felt different with my family sleeping under its roof. Fuller, more purposeful somehow. I thought about the previous Christmas, How I had sat in this same spot, nursing my hurt, and wondering if I would ever again be part of my grandchildren's lives in a meaningful way. The contrast between then and now was so stark, it almost seemed like I was remembering someone else's life. Gerald had been right about how money changes relationships, but perhaps not entirely in the way he'd feared. Yes, financial revelations had altered the dynamics of our family, but they had also created openings for honesty and growth that might not have happened otherwise. The important thing was what we had chosen to build on that foundation. Not obligation or transaction, but genuine care and mutual respect. Not financial dependency, but collaborative support. Not competition between mother and daughter-in-law, but partnership in nurturing the children we both loved. As I finally rose to go to bed, I passed the guest room where Emma and Dylan slept. The door was ajar, and I couldn't resist peeking in at their peaceful faces. In the soft glow of the nightlight, they looked like angels. Dylan sprawled across his side of the bed, Emma curled tightly around her stuffed bunny. This, I thought, was true wealth. Not the numbers in my bank accounts or the inheritance that had recently expanded my financial portfolio, but these precious relationships, this belonging, this love that flowed across generations. Money had indeed brought my grandchildren back into my life. But love, honest, imperfect, growing love, was what would keep them there. Spring arrived with the gentle persistence that follows even the harshest winters. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots in my garden beds, and the maple trees budded with the promise of new leaves. It felt symbolic somehow, this renewal, after dormancy, this fresh beginning after a period of hardship. In early April, just as the daffodils were reaching their peak in my front yard, Thomas called at 6 a.m, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Mom, it's time. Vanessa's water broke about an hour ago. We're heading to the hospital now." I was instantly alert, throwing off the covers and reaching for the clothes I'd laid out in anticipation of this call. "How is she feeling? How far apart? Are the contractions?" "About 7 minutes. She's calm. Calmer than I am, honestly. Her mother's flight lands at 9, but we could use some help with the kids if you're able." "Of course. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Should I bring them? To my house or stay at yours? Could you stay here?" "Emma's still asleep and Dylan has school today. I've already called his teacher to explain the situation, but we think keeping his routine as normal as possible would be best." "I agree completely. Don't worry about anything here. Just focus on Vanessa and the baby." I threw together an overnight bag, uncertain how long I might need to stay, and drove to their house through the quiet morning streets. Thomas met me at the door, his hair disheveled and eyes bright with a mixture of anxiety and joy. Emma's still sleeping. Dylan's up, but still in his pajamas. "I've made coffee," he reported, already halfway out the door. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Go," I urged, taking the house key he handed me. "Keep us updated." The morning unfolded in a flurry of activity, getting Dylan dressed and fed, packing his lunch, finding the permission slip for his field trip that had somehow migrated to under the sofa. Emma woke cranky and disoriented, sensing the disruption to her routine. "Where's Mommy?" she demanded, her lower lip trembling. "Mommy and Daddy have gone to the hospital to get your new baby brother or sister," I explained, helping her into her clothes. "Isn't that exciting? You're going to be a big sister today." Her eyes widened. "Today? The baby is coming today?" "It looks that way. And you know what? When Grandma comes from the airport, we're going to make a special welcome home sign for the baby. Would you like that?" She nodded enthusiastically, her momentary distress forgotten in the promise of a creative project. After dropping Dylan at school with reassurances that I'd text him updates throughout the day, Emma and I returned home to await Vanessa's mother. We baked banana muffins, Emma's contribution to the welcome baby preparations, and started on a colorful banner for the front door. Vanessa's mother arrived mid-morning, tired from her early flight, but exuding the special energy of a woman about to meet her newest grandchild. Patricia and I had met several times over the past year, most recently at Christmas, and had developed a cordial, if not particularly close, relationship. "Any news?" she asked as she set down her suitcase. "Thomas texted about an hour ago. Vanessa's at 6 centimeters, everything progressing normally." She nodded, relieved. "Third babies often come quickly. We might have news soon." Together, the three of us continued preparations, finishing the welcome banner, preparing a casserole that could be easily reheated when the new parents returned home, tidying the nursery one final time. There was something deeply satisfying about this collaborative effort between grandmothers, each of us bringing our skills and care to support the expanding family. Just after noon, Thomas called. "It's a boy," he announced, his voice thick with emotion. 7 pounds, 9 ounces, Benjamin Gerald Wilson. Both he and Vanessa are doing great. Tears sprang to my eyes at the unexpected middle name, my late husband honored in this new generation. "Benjamin Gerald," I repeated softly. "It's perfect, Thomas. Absolutely perfect," Vanessa insisted, he said, seeming to understand the source of my emotion. She said Dad should be remembered in the family line. After sharing the news with Patricia and a very excited Emma, we finalized arrangements for the day. Patricia would pick up Dylan from school and bring him directly to the BAM hospital to meet his new brother. Emma and I would finish preparing the house, then join them later in the afternoon. As we worked, Patricia and I fell into conversation about the remarkable changes of the past year. "Vanessa has mentioned how different things are now," she said, as we folded baby blankets. "She was quite honest about the difficulties you had before." I wasn't sure how to respond. Vanessa and I had reached our own understanding, but I had no idea how much she'd shared with her mother about the financial aspects of our reconciliation. "We've come a long way," I acknowledged cautiously. Patricia's expression was thoughtful as she smoothed a tiny sleeper. "She told me everything, Margaret. About excluding you from their lives, about coming to you for money when they needed help with the house, about how that changed the dynamics between you." I felt a flush of embarrassment, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Perhaps it was the vulnerability of having our family conflicts exposed to outsiders, even those as intimately connected as Patricia. It was a difficult time, I admitted, for all of us. "What I find remarkable," she continued, "isn't that money brought you back into their lives initially. That's human nature, unfortunately. What's extraordinary is how you've all transformed that beginning into something genuine and meaningful." Her perspective surprised me. I had worried at times that outsiders might view our reconciliation as purely transactional, that I had essentially purchased access to my grandchildren through financial leverage. "Vanessa has grown tremendously this past year," Patricia added. "She's more secure in her parenting, more open to other perspectives. She attributes much of that to your influence, your patience and willingness to respect her boundaries even while establishing your own." "She's taught me a great deal as well," I said sincerely. "About flexibility, about communicating needs directly, about embracing new approaches." Patricia smiled. "That's what healthy family relationships should be. Mutual growth, mutual respect. It doesn't matter how you found your way there, only that you did." Her words settled something within me that had remained slightly unsettled, even amid our family's healing. The path to reconciliation might have been unconventional, might have been initially sparked by financial need rather than pure emotional reconnection, but the relationship we had built was no less authentic for its complicated beginnings. Later that afternoon, Emma and I arrived at the hospital, laden with flowers and a small gift for the new baby. Dylan came racing down the corridor to meet us, his face alight with excitement. "Grandma, I saw him. I saw Benjamin. He's really small and his face is all red and he didn't even open his eyes when I talked to him." I laughed, lifting Emma into my arms so she wouldn't be trampled by her brother's enthusiasm. Newborn babies sleep a lot, remember? We talked about that. His eyes will open more as he gets used to being out in the world. Vanessa was sitting up in bed when we entered the room, looking tired, but radiant. Thomas stood beside her, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. Patricia sat in a corner chair, watching the scene with quiet contentment. "Here he is," Thomas said softly as I approached. "Benjamin Gerald Wilson, meet your Grandma Margaret," as he carefully transferred the newborn into my arms. I felt the familiar weight and warmth that never fails to touch the deepest part of a grandmother's heart. Benjamin's tiny face was peaceful in sleep, his perfect miniature features reminding me forcibly of Thomas as a newborn. "He's absolutely beautiful," I whispered, drinking in every detail. The delicate eyelashes, the rosebud mouth, the fine dark hair. "I see both of you in him." Emma tugged at my sleeve, her face solemn with the gravity of the moment. "Can I see my brother? Can I touch him?" I knelt carefully, balancing Benjamin securely while allowing Emma to examine him closely. She reached out one gentle finger to touch his cheek, then looked up at me with wide, wondering eyes. "He's so soft," she marveled. "Softer than my bunny." "That's because he's brand new," I explained. "The newest person in our whole family." As I surrendered Benjamin to Patricia's waiting arms and helped Dylan climb carefully onto the bed to sit beside Vanessa, I felt a profound sense of completion. This moment, this gathering of 3 generations, this welcome of new life, represented everything I had feared losing a year ago. Watching Patricia with Benjamin, I realized something important. There was room in this family for both of us. My relationship with my grandchildren wasn't diminished by their connection to their other grandmother. Our roles weren't in competition but in complement, each of us bringing different gifts, different perspectives, different types of love to these precious children. That evening, after helping settle Dylan and Emma at home with Patricia, I prepared to return to my own house. Thomas walked me to the door, his face showing the beautiful exhaustion of a new father. "Thank you for everything today, Mom. Having you here made all the difference. For the kids, for Vanessa, for me. I wouldn't have been anywhere else." I assured him. He hesitated, then continued in a more serious tone. "I've been thinking about this all day. When Benjamin was born and they placed him in my arms, I had this overwhelming realization of how precious family is, how irreplaceable those connections are." I nodded, understanding completely the perspective that new life brings. "A year ago, we almost permanently damaged something invaluable. Your relationship with us, with your grandchildren. And for what? Pride? Miscommunication? Fear of being judged?" He shook his head. "It seems so senseless now." "We all made mistakes," I reminded him gently. "Yes. But when I think about what we might have lost, what Benjamin might never have known." His voice caught. "I'm just profoundly grateful that we found our way back to each other, whatever the catalyst." I hugged him tightly, this son who had grown into such a thoughtful man. So am I. More than words can express. As I drove home through the spring evening, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From isolation and heartache to this expansion of love and family. From being excluded from Christmas to watching my newest grandchild enter the world surrounded by the unified embrace of his family. Money had indeed opened the door to reconciliation, as Gerald had warned it might. But what had ultimately healed? Our family wasn't financial transactions or inheritance plans. It was the hard work of genuine communication, the vulnerability of acknowledging mistakes, the courage to establish healthy boundaries while respecting others. When I arrived home, I found a text message from Vanessa waiting on my phone. Attached was a photo of Benjamin sleeping peacefully in his hospital bassinet. "We can never thank you enough for all you've done for our family," the message read. Not just the financial support, which has been tremendous, but the patience, wisdom, and love you've shown us all. Benjamin is so lucky to have you for his grandmother. We all are. I saved the photo, my heart full to overflowing. Whatever complex path had led us here, whatever combination of financial need, family crisis, and genuine desire for healing had initiated our reconciliation, we had arrived at a place of authentic connection. And that, I reflected as I prepared, for bed in my quiet house, was the greatest wealth of all. Not the bank accounts or investment portfolios that had opened doors, but the precious, irreplaceable human bonds that had walked through them. 5 years passed, bringing with them the subtle transformations that occur in families, children growing taller, relationships deepening, new traditions taking root alongside the old. Benjamin, no longer a newborn but an energetic kindergartner, with his father's curious mind and his mother's determined spirit, had just celebrated his 5th birthday with a dinosaur-themed party that had transformed my backyard into a prehistoric playground. On a warm Saturday in June, I sat on the patio of Thomas and Vanessa's home, watching the children splash in the waiting pool. Dylan, now 11 and increasingly interested in science and technology, was demonstrating water displacement principles to his siblings using plastic cups and action figures. Emma, 8 going on 18, supervised with the benevolent authority of a middle child who had found her place in the family hierarchy. Benjamin, still flush with the importance of being 5, alternated between following Dylan's instructions and creating his own chaotic experiments. "They're getting along remarkably well today," Vanessa commented as she joined me, setting down a tray with iced tea and fresh fruit. At 39, she had settled into a confident maturity that suited her. After losing her corporate position, during her pregnancy with Benjamin, she had eventually started her own small interior design business that allowed her to balance work and family on her own terms. "It won't last," I predicted with the wisdom of experience. "But it's lovely while it does." She laughed, pouring tea into frosted glasses. "You're probably right. Dylan has a science project presentation on Monday that he's nervous about. The cooperation is likely his way of ensuring household harmony before his big day. Strategic thinking. He gets that from his father." "Speaking of Thomas," Vanessa said, checking her watch, "he should be back from the airport with your mystery guest soon. Are you going to tell me who it is, or do I have to wait along with the children?" I smiled, enjoying the anticipation. "Just an old friend who's become quite important to me. I think you'll approve." The past 5 years had brought many changes, but perhaps the most surprising was my own personal growth. After decades of defining myself primarily through my relationships, to others, wife, mother, grandmother, teacher, I had begun to develop a more independent identity. I'd taken up watercolor painting, joined a book club that focused on international literature, and even traveled to Italy for a 2-week cooking course the previous year. This expansion of my world had been encouraged, rather than resented, by my family. Thomas and Vanessa had insisted I take the Italian trip, arranging to video call with the children every few days so they could hear about my adventures. Dylan had requested cooking lessons upon my return, and we'd spent several happy weekends mastering the art of authentic pasta. My relationship with Vanessa had evolved into something I would never have imagined during those painful months of estrangement. We had moved beyond the careful politeness of our initial reconciliation, through the growing trust of our cooperative parenting years, into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and affection. We didn't always agree. We were too different, in temperament and perspective for that. But we had learned to value those differences rather than allow them to create friction. "Mom!" Dylan's excited voice interrupted my reflections. "Dad's car just pulled in." The children immediately abandoned their water play, grabbing towels and racing toward the front of the house with the boundless energy of youth. Vanessa and I followed at a more measured pace, exchanging amused glances at their enthusiasm. Thomas emerged from the driver's side, waving to the children who had gathered at the front gate. Then the passenger door opened, and Eleanor stepped out, her silver hair gleaming in the summer sunshine. "Eleanor!" Vanessa exclaimed, clearly surprised. What a lovely surprise. But it wasn't Eleanor who had the children buzzing with excitement. From the back seat emerged a familiar young woman with curly brown hair, now styled in a professional bob. Sophia, Eleanor's granddaughter, had grown from the college student who had built blanket forts with Dylan into a poised young engineer. Behind her came a man I'd met only twice before, David, her fiancé, a pediatric resident with kind eyes and a quick smile. "Sophia!" Dylan called, racing forward to greet her with the special handshake they had developed over years of occasional visits. Emma followed more sedately, though her excitement was evident in her bouncing steps. Benjamin, who had been a toddler when Sophia last visited, hid shyly behind his sister until Sophia knelt to his level. "You must be Benjamin," she said, warmly. "Your grandma has told me so much about you. I hear you like dinosaurs even more than Dylan did at your age." Benjamin's face lit up at this recognition of his passion, and his shyness evaporated instantly. "I know all the dinosaurs," he declared, launching into an earnest explanation of the differences between carnivores and herbivores. As the impromptu reunion moved to the backyard, I found myself beside Eleanor, who watched the scene with evident pleasure. "Your plan is working perfectly," she observed quietly, "though I still think you could have prepared them a bit more." "Where would be the fun in that?" I countered. "Besides, some announcements are better made in person." The mystery visit had been in planning for months. After Sophia's engagement the previous winter, she and David had been exploring locations for their new life together. As a newly qualified environmental engineer specializing in sustainable urban development, Sophia had job opportunities in several cities. David, completing his residency, had similar flexibility. When I learned they were considering our town due to its growing hospital system and emerging focus on green infrastructure, I had seen an opportunity. After consulting with Eleanor, I had made a proposal through our family legacy fund. Seed money for Sophia to establish a consultancy focused on helping local businesses and homes transition to more sustainable practices. The community would benefit, Sophia would have the foundation for her career, and Eleanor's granddaughter would be nearby as Eleanor entered her more vulnerable years. Later, as we gathered around the patio table for an impromptu early dinner, I stood to make the announcement. "I've asked Sophia and David here today because they have some news that affects all of us," I began, smiling at the confusion on my family's faces. "As some of you know, Sophia has become like another grandchild to me over the years, ever since that Christmas when Eleanor threw her back out and Sophia came for lunch. She taught me how to build the best blanket forts," Dylan interjected, earning laughs from around the table. "Indeed she did," I acknowledged. "And now, I'm delighted to announce that Sophia and David have decided to move to our community permanently. David will be joining the pediatric department at Memorial Hospital, and Sophia will be establishing her own environmental engineering consultancy with support from our family legacy fund." The announcement was met with enthusiasm, particularly from the children who had grown fond of Sophia over her periodic visits. Vanessa caught my eye across the table, her expression thoughtful as she connected the pieces. "The family legacy fund," she said slowly. "You're using it to help Sophia establish her business here?" I nodded, uncertain how she would react to this. "Allocation of resources originally designated for our immediate family." Her face broke into a warm smile. "That's perfect, Margaret. Exactly what the fund was designed for, supporting positive community impact while reinforcing family values." "I'm so pleased you approve," I said, genuinely relieved. The board of directors voted unanimously to support the project. The board, of course, consisted of Thomas, Vanessa, myself, and 2 trusted financial advisors. We had established this governance structure for the Legacy Fund to ensure transparent decision-making and shared responsibility. Over the years, The fund had supported various initiatives, educational programs at the children's schools, environmental projects in our community, and specialized learning opportunities for the grandchildren. As the evening progressed and conversation flowed easily among this expanded circle of connection, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought us here. The painful estrangement that had once seemed insurmountable. The financial revelation that had opened a door to reconciliation. The careful rebuilding of trust and relationship that had transformed an initially transactional reconnection into something authentic and enduring. While the children showed David their treehouse and Sophia discussed potential business locations with Thomas, Eleanor joined me at the edge of the patio. "Penny, for your thoughts," she offered, settling into the chair beside me. "I was just thinking about how different things were 5 years ago," I admitted. "How close I came to losing all of this." Eleanor nodded, her expression reflective. "I remember those days. You were devastated by the separation from your grandchildren. And now look, you're hosting family gatherings, making financial decisions together, expanding your circle to include honorary grandchildren." "It's more than I could have hoped for," I agreed. Even after the initial reconciliation, I worried that it was fragile, that it might not survive if circumstances changed. But it has survived. And more than that, it's thrived. It's thrived. She was right. What had begun as a relationship rebuilt on financial need had evolved into something far more resilient. We had weathered various challenges over the years. Vanessa's job loss, Thomas's brief health scare last winter, the normal conflicts that arise in any family. Through it all, the foundation we had carefully constructed held firm. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down and people began to disperse, Vanessa pulled me aside. "I wanted to tell you something before you head home," she said, her expression unusually solemn. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about our journey, how far we've come since those difficult days." I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "When Benjamin asked about his name last week, why his middle name is Gerald, I told him about your husband, about how he was wise with money and resources, but also kind and principled. I explained that those were values we wanted to pass down to him." The mention of Gerald brought the familiar bittersweet ache, how he would have loved these grandchildren, this extended family we had built. "That would have meant a lot to him," I said softly. "There's more," Vanessa continued. "Benjamin asked if the money you shared with us when we needed it for the house came from Grandpa Gerald. And I realized it was time for an honest conversation about privilege, responsibility, and family dynamics." My chest tightened slightly. These were complex topics to discuss with a 5-year-old. I explained in simple terms that yes, the money that helped us buy our home came from Grandpa Gerald's careful planning. But more importantly, I told him that money can sometimes change how people treat each other, and that our family had learned some hard lessons about that. I was stunned by her candor. "Vanessa, that's a very mature conversation to have with such a young child," she smiled ruefully. "He didn't understand all of it, of course, but I wanted to begin laying the groundwork for values that will serve him well as he grows up in a family with financial privilege. And part of that is acknowledging our mistakes, how we temporarily valued money over relationship, how we used the children as leverage." "We all made mistakes," I reminded her gently. "Yes, but the important thing is what we built afterward." She hesitated, then added, "I want all 3 children to understand that the real legacy isn't the money or the funds or the material advantages. It's the effort we put into maintaining genuine connections despite conflicts or differences." Her insight moved me deeply. This wasn't the defensive young mother who had once seen me as competition, nor the grateful daughter-in-law who had initially welcomed me back out of financial necessity. This was a mature woman who had processed our complex history and extracted meaningful lessons for the next generation. "You've become quite wise," I told her, meaning it sincerely. She laughed softly. I had a good teacher. You modeled how to set boundaries without building walls, how to maintain your dignity without sacrificing connection. Those lessons changed me, Margaret, changed all of us. As we embraced before parting, I felt the full circle of our journey. From estrangement to reconciliation to this deep, authentic partnership in family life. Driving home that night, I passed the black sand beaches of my own life. The difficult terrain that had once seemed so daunting but had ultimately led to beautiful vistas I could never have anticipated. The financial revelation that had initially reopened doors had evolved into something far more valuable, a family culture of transparency, mutual respect, and genuine affection. Gerald had been right that money changes relationships. But he hadn't foreseen the possibility that sometimes, if handled with wisdom and care, those changes could ultimately lead to something stronger and more authentic than what had existed before. When I arrived home, I found a text message waiting from Thomas. "Thank you for today, Mom. Not just for hosting, but for expanding our family circle in such meaningful ways. Dad would be proud of how you've managed everything. The finances, yes, but more importantly, the relationships. We love you." I smiled, setting down my phone and gazing out at my garden where generations of children had played. Thomas as a boy, now Dylan, Emma, and Benjamin, and perhaps someday their children too. The true wealth wasn't in bank accounts or investment portfolios, but in these connections that spanned time and generations. My daughter-in-law had once banned me from seeing my grandchildren, then begged for help when she saw my net worth. But the story hadn't ended there. It had continued through reconciliation and rebuilding, through honest conversations and shared celebrations, through the hard work of creating something authentic from challenging beginnings. And that continuing story, one of growth, forgiveness, and genuine connection, was worth more than all the money in the world.